You just think about it. All the Catholics that are out there, not in the military, but and mind you, this is the largest military economy in the history of the world that we live in, Catholic, I mean, right here in the United States. All the Catholics that are out there on assembly lines, in one way or another, whether it's drawing, architect, and what they're doing, their sole purpose for 8 hours a day, for which they get paid pretty well, is to make stuff, to smash people, kill people, brutalize people, tear people apart. That's
Yeah.
their life. And they go to church on Sunday. I ain't nothing about that.
Yeah. So, Charlie, you were saying that was it Buddha or somebody's uh, 8 rules, and one of them was correct livelihood?
Yeah, Buddha. I now
Not
it's
Buddha.
Buddha. Yeah, Buddha.
Oh, Buddha. Okay.
Yeah, Siddhartha Gautama. Yeah, Buddha has. I now once Ellen. Um, I haven't kept up with my Buddhism in the last 50 years, but and my mind isn't going,
Yeah.
but I think the way I'm going to say it is approximately right. It may be exactly right. See, there are, I believe he said, there are 8 golden principles to live by. So these are foundational principles. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was right livelihood,
Okay.
meaning everyone spends so much of their time on their livelihood, the food, the clothing, everything. And it makes no difference whether you're a caveman or a cave woman or whether you work on Wall Street, or whatever.
Yeah.
So Buddha saw that. He said, you can't be spending 8, 10 hours a day at something, and it's being contrary to these other principles, and still be going to be what you're supposed to be as a human being.
Yeah, you can't like compartmentalize that and put it.
No, you can't leave it. It doesn't. Human life does not leave what you've just been doing. You don't walk into a pornographic movie for 8 hours and walk out, and no, it stays. However it affects, we don't know, but it's
Mhm.
there.
Yeah.
And if that goes on for months and years, of course, eh?
Mhm.
Well, that being the case, see, the and living in a country, the United States, that has the largest military budget in the history of the world. It is this year going to be $1 trillion. No country in the world, China or Russia, comes anywhere close to spending that kind of money
Or ever
on
has in the
or
history.
ever has.
Yeah.
No one has. See? And and so so that being the case, with that kind of money being spent, who is doing the jobs, making the tanks, the planes, developing the electromagnetic weapons, you name it,
Hmm.
Who? Ordinary people. Who's running the drones? It's just not the pilot in the B-29 or the pilot in the stealth bomber. Someone had to put the stealth bomber together. On and on and on and on. And of course, who brings their gas to them and everything else, huh?
Hmm.
And the food and it goes on and on and on, huh? I think I remember a statistic. Now this is from years ago now. That 60% of the jobs in Massachusetts are military related. Now
Wow.
this doesn't mean at MIT. Of course, MIT is loaded with military money, but this is the guy who delivers the oil to the local military base, and on and on and on it goes.
Hmm.
And so and so we have to ask ourselves to what extent to what extent is participation in the making of weapons and the use of weapons of mass destruction, of violence and human destruction.
Mhm.
What extent in his participation in the making or in the use of instruments of human destruction consistent with following Jesus?
Mhm.
Can you, as a Catholic, spend 8 hours a day making machine guns or nuclear weapons or whatever it is, huh?
Mhm.
And still say that you are following Jesus? And what did the bishop say about that? Because that's a big, big, big problem.
Yeah,
Now,
is that in the Challenge of Peace document? Anything
yes,
about that?
not that, but this is in there. Challenge of Peace document quotes, I think almost exactly, Vatican II. And Vatican II says the arms race is a virulent plague on humanity. And I believe it quotes it exactly. A virulent plague on humanity that has to be ended. And I think the Challenge of Peace adds to that the words, because it kills the poor even if the weapons are never used. Meaning, the money you spent on making a $2 billion fighter plane, that's money that isn't helping kids in
Mhm.
school or health care or leaving other people in destitution and misery and all that poverty can bring. Huh?
Mhm.
So, to that extent, it was acknowledged that the arms race is a virulent plague that kills people, even if the weapons are never used against them.
Mhm.
So, there's no country in the world where the arms race is not, I mean, it's not even close. I mean, not even close.
Yeah.
People, oh, China and Russia, which are the big, but they don't even, if I may use just a 1 to 10 scoring thing, it's like the United States is at 10 and Russia and China are at 2 and 3.
Yeah.
It's that much of a difference.
Yeah.
So now I have classmates, I graduated from Notre Dame with, huh? And they spend their lives at Draper Lab and MIT on nuclear weapons research.
Mhm.
They're Catholics. They're good Catholics. Something is wrong.
Mhm.
Something is wrong. And of course, once again, what are you going to do? Take jobs away from people? I
Mhm.
remember a documentary of Chariots of War, or so I forget what it was. Chariots of Fire. I don't know. One of those. It was put out by Marino, and it was a woman in Lawrence, Kansas. Now, Lawrence, Kansas is it has a lot of nuclear weapon silos in it. And she had a job doing something in relationship to one of the silos. Not a big deal, not pressing the buttons or
Sure.
anything. A very, very simple job, simple woman, and the narrator asked her, wouldn't, why are you doing this? Why? And she says, it's the only job here. And then she said, honestly, I would prefer making and selling chocolates than doing this. The simple human being, yes. But it was the only job there.
Mhm.
And that is what a militaristic perpetual war economy does.
Mhm.
It sucks everyone into it. And therefore, everyone has to justify what they're doing.
Mhm.
And therefore, the church, that is the institutional church, like the Grand Inquisitor, has to say, well, we'll, we will not condemn this. We'll say it's all right. We'll say it's according to the gospel to go out there every day and spend 8 hours of your life making instruments to destroy people and still be following Jesus.
Yeah, I that's one thing I came across when I was doing my little review of the catechism, but a lot of the stuff they use a lot of s- strange switching terminology. Like they'll talk about moral, immoral, legitimate, illegitimate, um, offenses against charity, sinful. Like they use all these different terminology to talk about whether things are permitted or not permitted, or lawful or not lawful, legitimate, illegitimate. It's like, what are you talking about? It's like all these different terminology. But so I was waiting for the part when it came to the commentary on this weaponry in the arms race. And I noticed that they didn't use any of that terminology. On the one hand, they say, and I'll read it, it'll take me just a second to read it, but
Hmm?
on the one hand, they say, it's not as good, it's not good in the way that people say it is good, and it's bad in ways that people don't always realize, and leave it at that. They don't clearly, I mean, they won't come out and say, you can't do this as a Catholic, but they say these things that are almost like pointless to say when all these other things they're weighing in on whether it's lawful or legitimate or whatever. But they won't say any of those words. So it says, the accumulation of arms strikes many as a paradoxically suitable way of deterring potential adversaries from war. They see it as the most effective means of ensuring peace among nations. This method of deterrence gives rise to strong moral reservations. So that's like the most negative thing, is that it gives rise to moral reservations. The arms race does not ensure peace. Far from eliminating the causes of war, it risks aggravating them. Spending enormous sums to produce ever new types of weapons impedes efforts to aid needy populations. It thwarts the development of peoples. Overarmament multiplies reasons for conflict and increases the danger of escalation. The production and the sale of arms affect the common good of nations and of international communities. Hence, public authorities have the right and duty to regulate them. The short-term pursuit of private or collective interest cannot legitimate undertakings that promote violence and conflict among nations and compromise the international juridical order. Um, it's like they say a bunch of stuff that makes it sound really bad, but yet they don't actually condemn it.
It's fluff,
It's total fluff. Thank you. Yeah,
rhetorical fluff.
it is total fluff. Yes.
The name of
Anybody
the game is money.
anybody who was looking at this who actually worked in a nuclear bomb factory, let's say they were the one making, they'd
It's
be like,
fine.
well, it doesn't say I can't do it.
Absolutely right. No problem at all.
So
As a
it
matter
just
of
makes you
fact,
wonder, what is the point of all this? Like, why even bother? Why even bother writing all this? It just gives a facade of taking a position and giving guidance, but it doesn't actually tell people what they can and can't do.
facade. It's
Yeah.
a public relations facade. It's the image you want to put out there. That you're for peace, you're for peace, you're for peace, you're doing this, you're saying the right things and so forth.
Yeah.
But you're not telling them to follow Jesus.
No, you're not even
Now,
telling them that it's wrong to like
no,
be
not yet.
against
No,
it.
no. Here's the problem. When the church gave up on its 300-year-old infallible tradition, uh, the foundational teachings of Jesus, the apostolic tradition, when it gave up on them and went with the just war with Augustine and Ambrose and on out, the primary value of the Augustinian just war theory is not love, it's justice. That's
Hmm.
critical. That's critical. The
Hmm.
primary value against which everything is being met of just war theory in Catholic Church is justice, not love. And you won't find anything of that in the gospel. Nothing.
Right. And like you said, nobody ever goes to meet God at the end of their life and say, I really want justice.
Yeah, no, that's not what we're talking about. Right.
Yeah.
Now, what that means is, see, what that means is that once you switch from the primary value of your group, or your institution, your community, from justice to love, huh? You switch from fear to freedom. That
Mm,
is, justice is based on fear. Fear. And fear, you've got to have the weapons to enforce it, the instruments.
mm-hmm.
So once you make the decision that justice is to be your aim in this life,
Mm-hmm.
that justice saves, not love. Once you make that decision, what takes place, Ellen, is you can no longer say that and make the point that I cannot take a job working in quote unquote defense, and it's a war industry, not a defense. That's a
Yeah.
euphemism.
Yeah.
I can't take a job working in the war industry because my Lord, God, and Savior does not teach. In fact, he teaches the opposite of um, if you want peace, prepare for war.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pagan philosophical concept, but it makes sense in terms of justice.
Yeah.
It makes no sense with loving as Christ loved. It makes no sense with one sentence in the apostolic tradition.
Mm-hmm.
It's the when Jesus cries over Jerusalem, if only this day you know what made for peace. That's what he's looking at. If you want peace, prepare for war. No,
Mm,
that's not the gospel, but that is what's behind. That is the truth. The understanding of reality, the presentation of Christianity that is behind Catholics being able to go out and work by the millions, making weapons of destruction of other people and participating and using them.
mm-hmm.
And using them. If you
Yeah.
want, prepare for war. That's a justice notion. That is not what Jesus teaches, which is love saves. As a matter of fact, I'll go for recent over the last decade or so, I've heard all kinds of places, Catholic and Protestant. I've heard a sentence that is approximately this: justice is at the heart of the gospel. That is absolutely erroneous. It is not.
No, no.
Christ-like love is at the heart of the gospel.
Well,
As a
okay.
matter
I
of
there I have a loophole for you though, because I talk about this sometimes with my students and I'm like, what's higher, mercy or justice? And we have like a little interesting little debate. But justice is at the top if you consider that the definition of justice is giving people what they are, giving them their due. And then if you define that as what do we owe other people? All we owe other people is love. Then you can square love with justice. But only if you define giving people what they're due as love.
living, giving people not what they do, but what God wants you to give them. So
Which is,
the
yes.
enemy, what that enemy is due is to straighten him out, to not let him destroy your family or you or anything
Well,
else.
but according to Jesus, all you owe that enemy is love, right? Like that's all you owe anyone.
And what defines love?
Uh,
Jesus defines love.
what's that?
Jesus is the definition of love.
Right, doing wanting what's best for them.
And therefore, as I say in the retreats, if uh, if love is present, justice is fulfilled. But if
Exactly.
justice is present, that doesn't mean love is fulfilled.
Right. Because, well, it depends on how you're defined. Because, of course, everybody thinks they know what the other person deserves.
And let anyone that tells you that, let them believe it. It's fine. You want to say it's justice, it's love, it's okay.
Yeah.
Define it that way, but that's not what you're hearing 99.999% of the time out in the street. And
No.
besides the fact, Ellen, for all the time that the gospel has been translated into another language other than Greek,
Mhm.
which means from the time of Luther, basically, or some before him, I guess. in English. In fact, I think Wycliffe is, I think it's the 500th anniversary of the first English translation. Anyway, this year and next year, because the first year, how did he do that? I think it's Wycliffe. They chased him all over Europe, stop him, translating it into a vernacular English, and then he got it done, the New Testament, and then they captured him. They took it and they destroyed it.
Oh,
That was 1525. 1526, he did the whole thing again, except that particular document exists.
okay.
So there was a real concern by the church right from the get-go of the printing press
Hmm.
that people would begin to read the New Testament and see the dissonance between what they had been taught by the powers that be in the church and what Jesus was saying in the gospel. That's
Oh, yeah, I forget that people mostly learned about this from people teaching them, not from reading it themselves.
that's they learned people teaching them, and the primary teachers were the priest in the pulpit.
Yeah. So
You know,
characters like Joan of Arc never probably even had a Bible. I mean,
they couldn't even read a Bible. Joan of Arc was illiterate. Yeah,
this is a really good point that I always forget because I think they just had a Bible in their house, like in the Middle Ages, and they
there's
didn't.
no such thing up until the time of Gutenberg, huh?
Wow. Okay, I always forget
Most
about that. Okay.
Christians were illiterate. And
Okay.
one of the big ways they learned, was the stained glass windows in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't seen it. I was up in Montreal one time years and years ago, and one of the big churches up there, um, the stained glass windows, they were like a war museum of fights that went on in Canada, you know.
Yeah.
But as a matter of
It's like that Russian military cathedral.
same
It's all
same
about the, yeah.
up in an Episcopal church where I gave a retreat and was never asked back in Hamilton, Massachusetts.
Am I the only one? Is the Catholics Against Militarism podcast the only place that has ever asked you back?
I think so. But this Episcopal church, they had me there, and then I happened to I was in the basement, of course, giving the retreat and everything, but I happened to go up into the church to look at it and stained glass windows. And in the back, inside the church, in the back, on the right and the left, there was two massive displays behind glass of General George Patton's guns, his helmets, his uniform. What? That just says that doesn't say Jesus.
No.
That doesn't say Jesus at all. And,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
maybe they didn't ask me back because I raised the problem with it. But
Yeah.
that's neither here nor there. The point is here that anything that's based on justice being at the heart of the gospel
Hmm.
is not correct. Love is at the heart of the gospel. Love can produce justice.
Hmm.
Love can produce justice. But let me put it to you this way. Uh,
Oh, wait, you were going to say
justice,
something about
justice, justice,
yeah.
justice, justice under law is compatible with hatred because it's enforced with fear.
Hmm.
And love is freedom. And that's what the Grand Inquisitor was complaining about to Jesus. You've given them freedom.
Oh,
Freedom is the problem. In Dostoevsky, freedom is a big problem. The real concern. But by golly, in the New Testament, in the New Testament, in Greek, the word is not justice, it's righteousness.
mm.
Since the first translation in English up until this century, I've got the figures on it here someplace. I could send them to you. The use of righteousness, where we now use justice, 90% of the time, the word was translated into English as righteousness.
Oh, you
It's
mean it was
only in the
translated
last
differently?
100 years they've begun to translate the Greek word as justice.
Wow.
But that's fine if you know what the word righteousness means, huh? Which means
Mhm.
it's conformity with the will of God. But but justice is not read that way by the person in the pew. It's
No.
not read that way by the priest. It's not. It's the New York Times. It's I don't know what it is.
Mhm.
Be that so. That's
It's an eye
but
for an
no,
eye usually.
no,
But
no. It's
well,
the same. Right. Yeah.
so you were saying that when people
Tit for
started
tat.
reading it,
Tit for tat.
okay, yeah, and you were saying that when people they were worried for a time that when people started actually being able to read the Bible, they were going to notice the
Oh
contradiction.
my gosh, yes. And that's just not Catholic. When Gutenberg and it became clear, there were laws passed all over Europe prohibiting people from printing it, from reading it.
Really?
Serious laws,
And
yes.
that's why?
Yes,
Because they were
English.
worried?
They were worried because remember what at least I was taught growing up. You are not to interpret the Bible yourself
Mm,
in the Catholic Church.
right.
It was to be interpreted by the church, and you were to follow that.
Okay.
Private interpretation was now this is all wrong, but this is what I was taught universally, and my mother and father and everyone else up until the
I
Second
just heard
Vatican.
this on a Catholic podcast literally last night. So a very popular podcaster was saying, this is why we don't interpret the Bible by ourselves, which
Ah, there you go, and it's still out there, and that's not so. Of course, you interpret it with the church, and so forth. And there's very little in the Bible that the church has actually interpreted. Very, very little.
really,
Almost nothing.
how could that
Almost nothing.
how can that be true? Like,
We're talking about formally interpreted, saying
oh,
this fact
formally.
means this.
Okay.
99.99%. Nope. But that's the problem. It was seen right at the beginning.
Hmm.
Once you put that Gutenberg thing out, that once you have Bibles all over the place, people are going to say, "Well, this doesn't match that, and this doesn't."
That's
What are
what
you
I'm doing. That's what
doing?
I'm doing in my podcast. I'm like, wait
That's
a minute.
right.
But if you
That's
look in the footnotes, it's like they're not even trying to interpret the New Testament in this way. It's like they're just
not
saying,
even trying. They could care less about interpreting the New Testament according to Jesus' teachings that love as he has loved is the primary principle of salvation. And
right.
that's what it's just not being done. You know, Ellen, I'll tell you what, um you know, a few days ago, just a few days ago, maybe a week ago, Elon Musk made a statement.
Hmm.
Uh Elon Musk made a statement, and I'm not sure exactly how it went, but it was approximately that Hitler and Stalin, Mao, uh, the real uh, power mongers and so forth of the 20th century uh, did not did not cause the Holocaust, did not cause wars. It was the government workers that did. Do you have that statement there? You
Yeah.
got it?
It's
Oh,
let's see. Where was it? Elon Musk. He said, where did it go? Oh, right here. He said, Stalin, Mao, and Hitler didn't murder millions of people. Their public sector employees did.
there you go. There you go. Yeah, there you go. And that's true. If you listen to my Behold the Lamb tapes, you know that retreat. I say when Hitler reached out, he could reach out maybe 36 inches.
I,
When he
that's
walked, he could take a step 18 inches. When he
that is
spoke,
Yeah, that's the what about Hitler thing. The
Yeah,
what about Hitler frequently asked question. That's the first thing I ever listened to you but to, and that's what pulled me into the whole thing because I was like, nobody ever explained it this way to me. But you say
no,
that he's just Hitler's just a guy. He's just a guy.
no. Why is it that it's so hard to see, huh?
I don't know.
That. Well, go right back to Jesus. You know, Caiaphas didn't kill Jesus. Pilate didn't kill Jesus. Jesus was killed by a group of Roman soldiers,
Yeah, I just did a
public,
little video on that.
public employees, public employees.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
it's
exactly what
wasn't an
must.
entire group of people that did it. It was actually very specific individuals. Not that we can scapegoat them, but like they are the ones who actually did it. And
And
yeah.
that's right. And they did it, and they were being paid for it.
Mhm.
Paid professional killers. That's what. In fact, yeah, that's what they were. Paid professional killers.
Yeah.
And so they Johnson or Nixon or Roosevelt or Churchill and so forth and so on. They didn't even get their hair mussed or their hands dirty.
Hmm.
It
So,
was the willingness of these people to go along with the spirit of Hitler, with the spirit of Churchill, or whatever the case may be. I
yeah.
don't know if you remember, but because this is years ago and I've forgotten it till just now. But I sent out a little drawn. I didn't do it. Someone else did it. Jim. You know, you
Jim
know Jim.
Douglas?
Yeah, not
Yeah.
Douglas. Jim
Jim.
here.
Oh, Jim in Boston. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You know. Anyway, it was a little cartoon, pencil kind of cartoon, and it was this guy, and he's labeled war, and he's dressed in a Roman soldier's garb as a fighting soldier, the breastplate and the helmets and he's unshaven and he's really brutal looking, and he's got his arms around a bishop, a rabbi, and an imam, and he's saying, "Thanks, fellas, I couldn't have done it without you."
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now, let me say a word about that. As you know, and you've probably taught it in your class, but the issue is that a psychologist by the name of Marshall in the Second World War actually went to the front lines and actually found out before the people who were shooting in the war, the Allies were shooting in the war, before they got back together, if they shot at anybody,
Mm.
e.g., all right,
And very few of them had.
and very few, very something like 10 to 15% had actually shot at people, and all the others either didn't fire their gun or fired it intentionally over people's heads.
Hmm.
That is, they did not want to kill.
Right.
They did not want to kill. And when he did the testing for the British, when he did the Japanese, the same thing came out true. Now, when they when the government found this out, U.S. government, they changed the whole method of military training
Yeah.
to make people like killing. So that in the
Get them
Korean
used to it.
War, it was about 50% that did it. In the
Mhm.
Vietnam War, it was just kill anyone who moved, and they nurtured that. Okay. But the point is,
Mhm.
people don't want to kill people.
Right.
It does terrible things to them. That's why when a policeman shoots someone, even legally, they immediately take the gun away from him, send him to psychological treatment and so forth. And if he can't come back from it, they give him full pay retirement.
Yeah.
It's just a terrible thing to kill a human being.
Yeah. You know what's sad? I just found out that did you ever hear about that guy Chris Kyle? He was like the American sniper, the most lethal American
Yeah,
sniper
right.
in human history. I think he was killed in 2015 and the guy who killed him, he was another fellow soldier with PTSD, and he took this PTSD guy to a gun range to help him do therapy because he used to work with veterans once he got out of the military. And the guy with PTSD ended up shooting him. He had serious problems, really bad PTSD. They just had the trial for him in February. He got prison for life. So he gets
Yeah.
sent to these wars. He gets completely messed up. He's probably on drugs. He has PTSD. Who knows what other problems? And then he ends up shooting a fellow, uh, American, and he gets life in prison. I mean, I know it was wrong for him to kill, but it's like there's no understanding or sympathy for what he had been through and what
And
might have messed him
the
up.
stupidity, Ellen, the stupidity of that by governments all over the world, the leaders of them, the
Yeah,
church, all of them, is that it was as if the motivation to shoot that person from that guy started right there at the second that he was with him. His
exactly.
motivation, they made him into something,
Exactly. They made him into
and no
something.
one's willing to look at it. No one's
No
willing.
one. Exactly. It's like, where did that come from? I mean, somebody put that in him. It's like, and they said, oh, well, he didn't have a defense of insanity because he knew what he was doing. Yeah, he knew what he was doing in the war too, but he still did it.
You
So
see,
I don't
this
know.
this, this
Yeah.
started out. See, remember we're talking about.
Oh, we have 1 minute left. Sorry, that went
Oh,
fast.
so we were talking about Elon Musk, eh?
Yeah.
And the, the, the Hitler's working people in the government killed the
Yeah.
people. And I'm like,
Yeah.
all right. And then we had talked about our cartoon, war with the arms around the bishops and rabbis. You see, if someone has a why, he can do almost anything. And when the churches and the religions give the person the why to kill another person, they become accomplices in murder.
Mm-hmm.
Because because without that why, they wouldn't. And their why is what? This is God's will. Can you imagine anything more severe in terms of a better than a why than this is God's will? And
Yeah.
no wonder war puts his arms around these people and says, "Thanks, guys."
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here, Charlie.
Ah, you're welcome.
Thanks